Hi guys, welcome back to Casting Commons, the show where we talk and discuss all things Pauper. I am your host, Teasdale, and this is my co-host, the Crypt Rat himself, Reese.
Hello.
Before we start, please do not forget to hit that like, subscribe, and follow button so you never miss an upload. This will also help the algorithm and get exposure, a really great way to support us. Magical subscribe animation inserted here. So Paul, what have you been up to this week?
Not an awful lot of Magic this week, to be honest. It's the F&Ms in our local area are standard for the month, which basically just doesn't interest me at all at the moment. So I have avoided that. I ended up going last Friday and playing some EDH, which was pretty good. I haven't played EDH in months at this point, so that was pretty fun. But apart from that, not a lot. So you'll have to carry us. What about yourself?
So the main thing I did is I recorded. I think I did another 2 leagues. I think I'll have to check the recordings, to be honest. Of Kuldotha. Still trying to learn the deck. The one that I do remember was a positive league. It wasn't as good as the first one, that's for sure. But there was one game in particular which I played. I don't want to say badly, but I definitely didn't play optimally. Like little things like, you know, I had multiple burn spells in hand, and I was trying to ease out damage or killing things or something like that, and I basically did it in a wrong order, which left me with a really bad spell in hand, or was it? Or I think it also maybe I had like 2 artifacts or something, and then I did it with a Galv Blast instead of like a bolt or a chain lightning or something like that. And then it left me like 2 turns later with like a chain lightning in hand, no bolt, and then I would have had an active Galv Blast and they were on like 1 or 2. So it like kind of basically would have meant I would have won if I had like played the spells in the right order based on outs and things like that. Which is again really, really interesting. And it does really, again, surprises me yet again, both leagues that I've played, how much, not, I don't want to say difficult to pilot, but how it definitely needs more credit than people give, for sure.
Yeah.
Like,
I think especially like missing like a point of damage here and there as well, like can be backbreaking for some games. It can be the difference. Like 1 point of damage is the difference between winning and losing in a lot of games with Kuldotha.
100%. And yeah, it's really a really good deck. I'm really enjoying it, for sure. I'm enjoying still playing it in leagues. I'll probably do I'll probably have 3 other leagues, so 4 leagues in total up on the channel, and then I'll probably move to try and look at learning glitters. I did play the deck obviously while I was testing for the Northern Pauper Open, so I've got a bit more testing of that than I did with Kuldotha, but I feel like this deck's probably pretty different now. I know it sounds weird, but it's pretty, I think, with the new mindset of Kuldotha and also the way it's changed, which we've talked about over the past few weeks, I think it's a lot better and a lot more to my style than it was. But so yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's as exciting as it gets.
More videos in the pipeline.
Always more videos in the pipeline. I just wish I could have the time to have more than 1 a week, which I probably need to get around to doing. So yeah, that is pretty much it. Would you like to move on to some news?
Yeah, go for it.
So, just a little bit of news this week. We have a big announcement, to be fair, but that will follow just after this little one. On the 24th of March, which is not that long away, there is a Pauper winner box in Recollect at Chester. £15 entry, and the first place wins a MKM booster box. There are other prizes, which is based on how many people attend and things like that. We will put the link in the description of this video so you can check that out. It is obviously pretty short notice. I do believe it is this weekend. It's not this weekend. Is it next weekend?
No, it's like 12 days.
Yeah, next weekend. I don't know what day it is. I'm not gonna lie, it is. So yeah, it will be pretty cool to see. Check it out if you are in the area or considering going, because it will be a good event. Chester and Recollect in general do have really good events.
Yeah, it's a nice store as well.
Mm-hmm. 'Other than that, we have a big announcement. Woo! 'Cause it will be a good event. Chester and Recollect in general do have really good events. Yeah, it's a nice store as well. Mm-hmm. Other than that, we have a big announcement. Woo! 'Cause it will be a good event. Chester and Recollect in general do have really good events. We will be hosting our own event. So we are going to have an event on the 1st of June, which will be in our local area. That's right, it's your guys' turn to come travel up to us instead of us traveling to yous. All joke aside, but this will be for a prize to win a secret lair with a top 8 and the usual pack per win sort of structure, which we will obviously dive deeper into in the event page when we do get round to having that. So this will be an event by ourselves, supported by our local game store, West Coast Gamers. And yeah, it'll be great to obviously have you guys all come up. We will have a ticket page and an event page and all that sort of, all singing, all dancing for when we do get round to doing that. It's just a lot more complicated than we thought.
Yeah, it should be a good one, hopefully. Obviously, the prizes already are pretty decent with the secret lair and then pack per win, including a cut to top 8, so an additional pack per win for each win in the top 8.
Yeah.
But we'll also have like loads of promos and giveaways and stuff on, so there will be a lot of cardboard to collect.
Yes. So yeah, keep your eyes out for that, guys, because we are really excited to have you guys along. It is great. We are also in a pub, also a good thing to come to.
And very close to the train station.
And very, very close to the train station, yes. That is also important. And very close to a lot of like B&Bs, and there's a travel lodge around the corner and things like that. So there's a lot of hotels and stuff around. But we do highly recommend, please come, because it will be absolutely amazing if you guys could come. I think we're going to look at, I think the cap will be roughly 40, I think is what we're looking at, ish. It might end up being like 42, 44, but it will be around 40. Again, we will shore up details, I should say, in the next couple of weeks. And yeah, we are looking forward to it. And I hope you guys all come along and join us too. Other than that, less exciting UK events. There has been a surge of UK events recently that won't be as good as ours, of course. But will obviously still be great. Followed Pauper Dan on Twitter, as this gentleman is retweeting them like they are going out of fashion. So keep an eye on those. And yeah, if you're interested in them, fire away. We obviously have full-time jobs and lives, so we can't attend them all, unfortunately, but we can shout them out as best as we can, for sure. And the final 2 bits of news is shout-outs or whatever, I guess, bits of information. Firstly, there won't be a recording for us guys next week because we are both away on holiday. Not the same holiday because I get sick of him enough on here. But we will both be on holiday. We lined our holidays up as well just to time it right, so we're just missing 1 whole week as well. This is how committed we are. That is the point. That was the whole reason for us booking. Like, I booked a holiday. I went, Reese, you've got to book this off this time when you're going away because we need this podcast.
I'm not gonna lie, I think I'm away longer than you, so you might have to cover for me.
And finally, the other shout out is please do check out Kalikaiz on YouTube. He does a Trophy Tuesday. It is a great way, and the reason we shout this out is obviously a great way to just merge them both together. We cover the challenges and dive into meta percentage and all that sort of, how we think the challenges are going down. And then Callie does all the trends over a week period of the league results and the 5-0s. So it's a really great way to see how they do compare and how they are different or how they're the same and all that sort of stuff. It is really cool to see. And he's just a cool guy to, spend time with. We got to hang out with him in the Northern Pub Robin, and highly recommend his channel anyways. And that is enough waffle. Would you like to move on to the Saturday, the 9th of March challenge?
Yeah. So it's the 32 challenge, as we generally get on a Saturday, with 56 players. First place was Blue Black Fair. Second place was Corgates. Third and fourth were both Blue White Glitters. Fifth was Corgates. Sixth was Blue Black Terror. Seventh was Bogles. Eighth was, I've called it Jund Toxin Gates, which we'll get into in a bit. And then the 2 near misses. Ninth was Blue Black Terror, and White Black Blade was 10th. So yeah, a sort of diverse top 8. Obviously, a lot of blue at the top end. But still, Bogles sneaking in 7th is cool to see. It's definitely not just a gimmick. It is pretty good again. And then obviously the Jund Gates in 8th, making some non-blue decks be able to get into the top 8. But yeah, just Colgate and Blue White Glitters, as we'll see, are the decks to beat right now.
Yeah, and that definitely seems to be the consensus. I was just double checking there. I was wondering if the Bogle's decks went really heavy on like life gain, but they really don't. They've just got
No.
the usual 4 Armadillo Cloaks and a 1 Spirit Link with and 2 life links in the side is this particular list. So I was thinking that obviously the increase in Bogles that we've seen over the last few weeks was due to the Glitters domination. I can imagine this deck obviously being, I don't want to say pretty favored, but probably pretty reasonable. Like it has similar to Glitters. Like the Glitters itself probably doesn't go as hard, but also they have more of them, and they also have lifelink effects.
Yeah, I think the thing with Bogles at the minute is it's got a good Blue White Glitters matchup because there can be you can be faster than Blue White Glitters and they have no interaction.
Yeah.
So you've got a pretty free reign to do whatever you want. And then same with Colgates. Really, is like a lot of the stuff just doesn't interact very well with Bogles. They have strands which you have to play around, but apart from that, you can just run through all the little guys. And yeah, the Bogles lists that we are seeing, they're not nothing massive has changed. They're not too different. Usually they're either cut down on a mask or cut down on a glitters, like one way or the other. Just 12 big pump effects is clearly too many, but other than that, they're sort of the Bogles you would expect to see.
So looking through the actual percentages of the Saturday, the Glitters deck was the big winner with 11 pilots, being 19% of the meta, which I'm not surprised at. The thing that I am surprised at is, again, which is similar to Sunday, there was only 3 pilots of Kuldotha. Kuldotha this weekend and probably last weekend is almost literally fell off. Like to being non-existent.
It has fell off pretty hard. I think a lot of that is also to do with Blue White Glitters now plays 8 Thraben Inspectors. Which, although Thraben Inspector is not the end of the world for Kuldotha, it does make a lot of the chip damage a lot more awkward.
Yeah.
And now they've got 8, your 2/2s. You can't really attack very well into 2 1/2s, and your Kuldothas just get shut down a lot, and you have to try and get those big turns with Kuldotha into Bushwhacker, and if you're doing that and they've got a rebuke or they're just going faster than you, it's not a good time.
Yeah.
And obviously a lot of Colgate to fight the Glitters decks. Also not an amazing matchup for Kuldotha. It's not the worst, but it's not good.
Yeah, and that makes sense, to be fair. That sort of, I would definitely have said, Blue White Glitters is obviously a pretty unfavourable matchup for Kuldotha, and that being leaning into 8 Thraben Inspectors.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think it was a fine matchup. Again, they don't have much interaction, and assuming they don't put a Glitters on a Mare Enforcer, you can usually interact with the guy they target. But yeah, now they've just got a million blockers, and they don't have to force the Glitters out when you've got interaction. To go fast enough, because they can just hold you back for long enough.
Yeah, and I think, to be fair, surprisingly enough, I think cutting the Frogmites to the Novice Inspectors is surprisingly annoying. A lot of the interaction is still the same almost. Obviously any bolt kills it, any Seal of Fire or all that sort of stuff still kills it. But you also lose your sideboard cards, which you Smash to Dusts and Smash to Smithereens, sorry. So I can definitely see that overall being an issue over time, is that you basically you don't get extra removal.
Yeah, it is pretty big that after sideboard as well. If they can get around you having a burn spell up and get a Glitters onto a non-artifact guy, you basically just can't kill it. It's just unkillable.
Yeah.
Assuming they don't run it out as a 3/3 or 4/4 something. But...
Yeah. So yeah, that was pretty interesting. The next played deck in this particular one was Gardens at 14%, which was 8 pilots again. Another deck that I'm assuming comes off the back of last week's qualifier with the insane Blue White Glitters weekend. Gardens seems to generally have a pretty okay Glitters matchup.
Yeah, it just didn't seem to convert at all in this challenge though, which was a weird one. I'm not even sure where the closest Gardens to the top was. is it like 28th or something like that?
Um,
No, even lower than that. So
yeah,
it really didn't convert. 32nd was the
yeah.
closest gardens to the top out of 56. So yeah, not a good weekend for gardens.
Which again also doesn't really surprise me in a sense, because to me, looking at this Gardens matchup, the Gardens players are just looking and saying, I'm going to run into Cold Author and Glitters, and that's what I want to verse. But the
Yeah,
meta shifted a lot from there, and the Cold Author sort of fell off, and the Glitters just went harder, to the point where out of the two, and I'm not saying that it's probably a favoured matchup for Gardens, it's very much I would say a lot harder for Gardens in Glitters terms than Cold Author. Like, I'd rather verse Cold Author than Glitters, because they can, all it takes is for them to rebuke a perfectly timed spell, and then they've got a guy which is Glitters in the Dead. Like,
yeah.
that can
I,
happen.
I think Glitters now is like ready for gardens as well. You look at most of the sideboards and
Mm,
they all have obsidian acolytes and stuff
yeah.
like that in now. It's not something that's missing from sideboards anymore.
The
So they are well prepared for the gardens matchup.
the one thing that
Um,
I've really found interesting as well, which sort of blends into the difference between Blue, White, and Jeskai as well, is before Novice Inspector, Jeskai ran like experimental synthesizer Glint Hawk to do like card advantage.
mm,
But to me, when I think about it, the difference in card advantage that gives you to what Novice Inspector, Thraben Inspector gives you is completely different, because the synth and the Glint Hawk is card advantage there and then. Obviously, you
yeah,
have to play the cards that turn, so you have really good card advantage. You don't have to use the cards in your hand as such, but you just play what you're given. But what that tends to me, what that tends to lean into is very much a overly aggressive board
yeah.
that you don't actually have that ability to recoup after that's gone. So
Yeah, especially against gardens with like Crypt Rats and Drowning
exactly,
Sorrows. You get your board wiped and you pop your synth for a samurai, and that's the end of your card advantage.
exactly.
Yeah,
Where obviously you've got Novice Inspector, Thraben Inspector, you just play these cards. You've got a card kind of sitting in your back pocket,
yeah,
ready. The pop it. You spend one turn probably popping a couple of clues, and you've got a handful again, and you're ready to go.
yeah. I think as well, just leaning into that a bit more, it does mean that you can draw cards like ninjas and ginger brutes, and you don't have to commit them to the board.
Yeah.
You can hold them for if you draw glitters, or you can like you draw your ninja, and then you can ninja to it in and get more card advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas yeah, like you said with the synth, it's you do it now or it's gone type thing.
Yeah, and it really does lean into it surprised me initially that they were cutting the frog mic, because obviously it is an aggressive card that can play very, very early and all that sort of stuff. But as you say, with all these sort of cards that you've got, you just don't need it. You're
No,
literally just playing a bunch of stuff. I'm gonna wait until you tap out or answer all this stuff, and then I'm gonna jam a big glitters on it, and you're gonna die.
yeah,
And that is the extent of it, regardless of the hate as well, which has also surprised me. Like, we've got what, 2 in the top 8, and we've got 11 pilots. Like, it's still pretty good going into the top 8.
yeah,
Um, that I do think that this deck is definitely surprisingly good.
yeah. I think it's another reason why like the other Terra variants now are sort of making a comeback on mono blue as well. Like
Mm,
we don't really see mono blue, but we're seeing quite a bit of blue black and the occasional blue red, just because they need the like either cheaper or free removal spells to
mm,
like battle this deck.
yeah, 100%.
Like snuff out and Scred and Bolt are just really key to not
Mm,
dying early. And if you're relying on holding up mana for a snap and it just gets rebuked, you're gonna have a bad time.
mm. Which I guess leads me to the next point as well, which is the final 2 points that I was touching on. Well, the two things that I'll touch on is one, Black White Blade seems to have made a sort of comeback, went to be non-existent. There's 3 pilots this week to this challenge, and there is one of them coming in just missing out on 10th place.
Yeah, yeah,
And the final point as well is that Scred, the blue red Scred, like the blue red terror list. There was 8 pilots playing that deck
yeah,
at 14%, and only 3 pilots playing blue black terror, and 2 of them have basically reached the top 10,
yeah,
which is surprising. But also in the same sort of side of it, I would say blue red Scred seems to be worse against the things like Colgate and
yeah.
other things like that. So I wouldn't be too hung up on it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it does have tools. Like the blue-red deck in particular has a lot of tools for different matchups. Um, there was one that came 11th place, so again, just very close.
Just
but
very close.
yeah, it's the Terra decks definitely adding a colour is making them a lot more competitive, I think, at the moment.
100%.
I'm not sure if you've got the percentage from Mono Blue, but I don't think I've seen one when I've been
Mono
scrolling the challenges.
Blue Terra, there was 0 from the
Yeah.
looks of this. There was only one mono. The only Mono Blue deck I think I seen was a Mono Blue Fair.
Yeah.
And there was one copy.
But yeah, it's a pretty interesting time. Obviously, Colgate and Blue White Glitters are by far the top dogs.
Yeah.
Other blue decks can compete with them very well. Bogles can still compete. Coldotha's pretty much fell off. Yeah, interesting.
Oh, for sure. And again, to add in that there is still like it's not just a closed off metagame for sure. Like we've got this Jun Toxin deck that's kind of coming out, which we'll obviously touch on.
Yeah, do you want to go into that now?
Yeah, we can do. That is fine by me.
Seems like the perfect segue.
Yeah.
So yeah, 8th place, Alvatar with a Jund Gate sort of mana base without Basilisk Gate. So just utilizing 8 of the dual land gates and then a couple of heap gates to pump out a bunch of treasures. Creature wise, it's running the shell we've mentioned maybe two or 3 weeks ago, where you play Crypt Rats and or Crackland Shaman with Toxin Analysis, which is from the new Ravnica set, the MKM set, which is target creature gains Death Touch and Lifelink until end of turn and investigate. So essentially the combo is you put this on a Crypt Rats or on a Crackland Shaman, deal a bunch of damage, kill everything, gain a bunch of life. Obviously with Crackland Shaman you can cast a spell on it and then sack the clue that the spell makes. You don't even need other artifacts. But yeah, just a pretty interesting slant on the deck that we spoke about previously, now running the Gate Shell. And a sort of like sacrifice sub-theme with Deadly Disputes, Fanatical Offerings, and Serrated Scorpions and Viridian Emissaries, which is a pretty interesting one.
Yeah, this deck's mental to me. Like, I do like the idea of the 4 blood fountains as well, just to keep recurring not only your win condition in the sense of Crypt Rats, but you've also can keep looping these Bleak Coven vampires, which are effectively they are basically vampire sovereigns, but are aggressively slanted. It's a 4/3 that loses 4 and gains 4, as opposed to being a 3/4 flyer that loses 3 and gains 3. So you can kind of loop those, which is pretty nice. You've obviously got the Wellsprings as a standard because you're running Deadly Dispute. You've got Spell Bombs, just because why not? It's a weird thing for me to say that basically you've got a black base deck that obviously utilizes other removal, so you don't need as many cast downs, or you haven't got any snuff outs or Tithing Blades. Like, just 3 cast downs is the only like removal spell almost. But yeah, it's really interesting, this deck, to be fair. Like, it's got a lot of moving parts, and coming obviously 8th is pretty good going.
Yeah, I think the blood fountains as well. Touching on those, the running 4, I'm assuming it allows it to cut the Crypt Rats and the Crackland Shaman numbers super thin.
Yeah.
Because it does only run 2 Crypt Rats and 1 Crackland Shaman. Whereas I think the other deck was like 2 and 3 or 4 and 3 or something like that. It was pretty heavy on them.
Yeah, definitely. I do also like the idea of it's got the gate mana base, but it's mainly there to accommodate the slight red splash. So it's got a small red splash in the main. It's got 1 Crackland Shaman, and then after that, it's basically got Ancient Grudge, Breath Weapon, Pyroblast, I think is all it's got on another Crackland Shaman in the sideboard.
Yeah.
So it's effectively just this black-green deck, but then it utilizes a lot of basics, so you can run Viridian Emissary, because it's got 9 swamps, 1 mountain, and 1 forest, which, for those that don't know what Viridian Emissary is a card that I used to love playing in Standard, I think. I played it in, like, Naya Pod or something along them lines. And it's basically a 1 and a green 2/1 that is an elf scout. Whenever it dies, you may search your library for a basic land. If you do, put it in your graveyard. Put it in a play tapped, and then shuffle. So it's like a
Yeah.
rampant growth when it dies,
Mm.
which is pretty interesting. And then I think it also sort of looks out of place with the serrated Scorpion too, which obviously when it dies, obviously deal 2 damage to each opponent, you gain 2 life. But it kind of gives it like this aggressive slant, but it also it kind of, to me, it looks like it gives it some sort of utility as well um when you don't have your Crypt Rats. You can literally just keep attacking for 1, and then if they eventually block, it's just, okay, my toxin analysis, this guy, like, okay, I guess it'll do. It's fine.
Yeah, it is a weird one. It's sort of the one that doesn't really make too much sense to me. Obviously, it's good against Kuldotha. It's
Yeah.
just like a really solid body that will gain your life and deal damage at some point. But Kuldotha's, like we said, not really that highly played.
Mm.
And yeah, on its own, like it's fine to sack to like an offering or a deadly dispute, but yeah,
It
it doesn't
definitely
really do
does.
that much. It's an odd one.
It definitely is an odd one, but I guess it's got a lot of card advantage in Deadly Dispute and Offering, as we've touched on. So I guess with the Blood Fountains and the Crypt Ratty, Bleak Coven stuff, they're eventually gonna just die from recurrent stuff. And I guess this like nickel and diamond them away will kind of eventually kill them.
Hmm.
Is the idea, I'm guessing. But definitely a sweet deck.
Yeah, it's a cool one. It's good to see sort of something we've seen previously, but just more developed and doing well, coming 8th in the challenge.
Yeah, like that's definitely nothing to scoff at all. Like with a off the wall deck, and it's definitely, hopefully we see more of this develop. And this
Yeah,
sort of
I think just that interaction between either the Crypt Rats or the Crackland Shaman and Toxin Analysis is really strong. Obviously, we've had the ability to do something similar for years, but not at such a good rate, I guess. With the Toxin Analysis being 1 mana and getting your card back at some point, or providing the fodder for the Shaman, and tacking the lifelink onto the Death Touch as well. It's just a lot of value at a reasonable rate.
100%.
Mm.
Definitely a cool deck. Would you like to move on to Sunday?
Yes. So Sunday was a weird one. The 64 challenge didn't fire. I believe you said it might have been due to daylight savings in America or something like that.
Yeah, I think the sort of America and South America had daylight savings, but so the only reason that I can guess it didn't fire is that, because then obviously half an hour later there was this event which did fire significantly.
Yeah, so the 64 didn't fire, and then half an hour later the 32 did fire, which is the same event but with worse prizes, and it fired with 73 players, which is more than enough to fire the 64. So yeah, Daybreak got a free cheap out on prizes ticket, I guess.
I do believe that, I don't know, someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I think I've seen it in the fans Discord that it also happened with the modern challenge, the exact same
right.
thing.
What,
because
the 64 doesn't
the 64
fire?
the 32 did, but like excessively.
Yeah.
So very
Very
strange.
odd. But yeah, it is a wild challenge as well. So first place was Blue White Glitters. Second place was Cycle Storm, of all things. Third place was FAMS. Fourth and fifth place were both Blue White Glitters. Sixth was Colgate. Seventh was Blue White Glitters. Eighth was Gardens. And then the near misses. Ninth was White Weenie. And 10th was another copy of Colgate. So yeah, this is sort of looking very similar to the Sunday 32 challenge we seen last week, which was just a stack of glitters. Looking at results like this, it starts to look like quite a big issue. I think glitters in particular has had such a boost from MKM, that it has probably become an issue at this point. I think it was fine up until now. It was very strong, but sort of kept in check. Whereas now the 8th Ravens, as weird as it is, seems to have pushed it over the top.
Yeah, I think the two things that makes it, obviously, we've touched on the 1-2 and the getting card advantage later, but obviously even strengthening the of one mind and things like that is definitely like a really weird position to put the deck in. Like, obviously they've got easy access to humans now, they've got and non-humans, they've got obviously it's just a strong deck all round that even the first place looking at that, it's sort of got the quote unquote like monster sort of consideration with the Gear Seeker Serpents, which we've seen some Jeskai decks do.
It is just a one-off, but yeah.
Yeah. And again with it's got like it's got flare and pains and things like that in the side, so it's definitely and turn aside. So I do think that this deck has come to think, oh, I'm gonna get hated in X, Y, or Z decks. Like, what are my bad matchups? That must be, it must be core game, it must be, dust to dust and all that sort of stuff. And it's got to take these into consideration, as we touched on last week. Like, it's not an issue. Like last week wasn't an issue with a Glitter's domination. It can, slip through the nets. People can be looking over to the left and looking at Kuldotha, thinking I need to target this deck, and then everyone's piloting Glitters and absolutely stomping them. Like, that's fine, but off the back of a Glitters domination and coming back into a next Sunday of 73 players and getting another Glitters domination, that's pretty worrying.
Yeah.
And there's not to say that it can't just be a 2-week blip. Like, we could next week literally have Kuldotha dominate and literally nothing, we're back to square one. That is totally a possibility, but we do think this deck's pretty strong. Well, I do anyways. I think this deck's obviously significantly stronger than I give it credit for. And yeah, it might be a worrying thing. But I do think that having the deck be almost doubly represented than the next lowest deck is quite a significant worry. 16 people played this deck, putting it at 22% meta percentage. And that's not including the one Jeskai Glitters as well.
And that's quite a lot for Pauper. Like, we don't usually see that, like, percentages that high. Like, when we were speaking about Kuldotha maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, that was at, like, 11 pilots in similar, like, sized events, or 8 pilots.
I was just going to say, the worrying statistic for me, though, is as well that 9 of those Glitters players were in the top 32. So over 50% of them converted to basically a win or a payout.
Yeah, in a 73 player event as well.
Yeah. That it was the Boogeyman as well.
Yeah.
It was the deck to beat. So.
But yeah, sort of outside of the 4 Glitters decks in the top 8, still some interesting ones there. Double combo in second and third with Cycle Storm and Fams. Definitely didn't expect to see Cycle Storm in one of the top 8s, and I believe even in the Saturday it was in the top 16. Yes, it was 15th on Saturday.
Was it the same pilot?
The same pilot as well, Tyrube 16-18, and then second on Sunday. There's nothing that stands out to me as new information in Cycle Storm. It looks like Cycle Storm we've seen before, but yeah, just doing really well.
To be fair, I think every time we have, as of late, the usual person that we do cover Cycle Storm is usually this gentleman, I believe, or this pilot, and obviously a very good pilot. Clearly, he's the only one risking the biscuit playing Cycle Storm in a challenge. Sweet to see, for sure. Deck's strong, and obviously it's fragile, but it's definitely a strong one. And the more people don't want to think about relics for Dredge or Terror or whatever, the more chances has to get through, which is good.
Yeah, I definitely think with sort of Glitters and Core Gates being the 2 decks to beat, obviously there isn't really a focus on Terror.
No.
So yeah, you sort of dodge a lot of the like incidental relics and incidental graveyard hit that was 100%. In the format.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, like going against Blue-White Glitters, you're not really coming up against that much interaction.
No.
There's very little other than just being one hit by Glitters or getting beat down fast. There's not much you really care about.
GN did it. sort of top forward with FAMs. Finally got there. Stuck to his guns and ignored Kali and went with his remove soul prohibit package and not the lose focus one that he did in the qualifier. Paid off. So obviously some sort of disputes going on there, which is the best counter package to rock and all this sort of stuff. But the deck's strong. Even I don't know how it would be against Glitters. Obviously, I do think this deck is pretty good against Kuldotha. Obviously, you've got Godfarrow's Faithful. You've got a bunch of random big toughness guys that just get in the way and just gain life out of range while it's doing obviously obnoxiously broken stuff. But yeah, definitely, it's nice to see. It's always good to see FAMs. I think if I was to verse a Archaeomancer Ephemerate loop deck, I'd prefer it to be FAMs than anything else because I think I'd fall asleep and want to cry otherwise. But yeah, I think this deck's just a sweet one in it. Really, let's be honest, it's definitely still doing broken things. And Sunscape Familiar's been breaking Pauper secretly for probably the past decade. Yeah.
And then I guess last for me is 9th place White Weenie. Obviously, always good to see White Weenie. It's nothing sort of out the ordinary. It's got one of Palace Sentinels, one of Recommission. Other than that, fairly stock White Weenie, but still able to compete with a lot of decks. I think as well, Prismatic Strands has got a bit better against the Glitters decks now that they've got a lot more coloured guys in. With the 4 extra inspectors replacing Frogmites. Obviously, they can still just put it on an Ornithopter if they need to, or a Gingerbrew, but if you sort of playing a bit of a back and forth game and they put it on Inspected, turning on your Prismatic Strands is definitely not nothing.
I guess the only thing that stands out to me is no Novice Inspector. They didn't. I don't know.
Yeah.
White Weenie doesn't seem to opt for the 8 inspectors.
No, I haven't really seen anyone go that far with it. I guess there's just not that much room. And especially in the 1-drop slot, you sort of set on 8. You don't really need any more. And you don't want to cut like Luminarch veterans. Obviously they're just really good in aggressive matchups. So yeah, it's one that I guess I could see coming in, but it doesn't have an automatic slot.
Like this is better. This is better than this. That makes sense. Totally makes sense. Just interesting that if I was to think of a deck that Novice Inspector would have went in, it would have been White Weenie. Obviously, mono white deck with extra card advantage and all that sort of stuff. But interesting for sure. The other thing I guess to touch on for me, obviously I guess we got a well done on the 8th place Gardens. Always going to shout out Gardens. Standard at this point. Nothing too out the ordinary. Nothing too crazy. 2 Avenging Hunters is, I guess, about as crazy as it gets. Sure. But other than that, I guess the interesting thing for me is the difference in metagames. So the next best deck after the Blue White Glitters being 16 pilots, being 22% of the meta, was Colgate with 9.5%, which is definitely a lot more as I would have expected it compared to Saturday. We'd have been, I think it only had 3 pilots on the Saturday.
Yeah.
Which it did. And then after that, you've basically got Gardens being 8% of the metagame with 6 pilots, which I don't think is too out of the ordinary. With Boros Synth also being 8%, but not a single one. I think the first Boros Synth I seen was like 40th place or something stupid. Yeah. The other thing interesting, there was 4 pilots of Cold Author, which sort of lines up with the 3 pilots on the Saturday, 4 pilots here. But the other thing to note about that is the first red in that list is 42nd place. Like that, I wouldn't have thought that would have been the case 2 weeks ago.
No, Cold Authors definitely fell off a lot.
As I say, the biggest 2 things is that in the top 32, 56% conversion rate for Blue White Glitters, which is pretty good going, and then 71% for Colgate, with five of the 7 pilots being in the top 32, 3 of them being in the top 16.
Yeah, Colgate's one of those where it's probably just the best deck,
Mm.
but just people don't seem to want to pick it up. Like the pilot numbers we see are always really low. Like you said on the Saturday was a 3 or 4 pilots, but then like all of them top 16,
Mm.
or like over half of them top 16, and it's like this deck you should just be playing Colgates if
Mm.
you can stomach playing Colgates, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah, it seems to me looking at uh these results that obviously all three, I'd say Glitters, Colgate, and Gardens are probably the three biggest decks at the moment. Um, and I don't know if it's because Colgate and Gardens are there obviously to fight Glitters.
Mm.
But yeah, it's definitely an because they all three of them had a successful conversion rate of obviously with high numbers of pilots. Like we had one Cycle Storm and obviously one came in the top 8. Obviously, that's 100% conversion rate.
Yeah,
Like, but with actual high numbers of pilots, those are really good numbers. Like we had a 66%, 71%, and 56% conversion rate for Gardens, Colgate, and Glitters.
mm.
Um, so yeah, it's pretty interesting. I guess the other deck that sort of seemed to fell off, which I guess also lines up, is Blue Black Fair. Um, we had 5
Yeah.
pilots in the Sunday, 2 of them top 32'd. But
It's definitely fell off in popularity, but it's still
mm,
just pulling good results. Obviously, won the Saturday challenge,
mm,
and then I think there was one like pretty high up in the top 16 on the Sunday as well. Um, yeah, yeah,
yeah, there's 2.
14th.
Yeah, two were in the top 32. One was in the top 16. So
Yeah,
it's still like putting up obviously decent-ish results. But I definitely think as you say, the popularity's definitely fell off. I would assume due to the aiming for Kuldotha, but I would have thought I would have had a reasonable Glitters matchup. But I guess only being able to counter one spell here and there with its slow start is probably not good enough. And
yeah, it is maybe just a bit slower, like you say. Yeah, a 1/1 flyer into a augur bolas or hold up counter spell is probably not really where you want to be.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I guess even the one that top 32 was 17th, so it only just missed out in the top 16. So
yeah.
they are still performing.
Mm,
But yeah, just fell off a lot from what we have seen since basically Baco brought it back and made it really popular.
mm. I guess the other thing I mentioned is that Blue Red Scred basically 180'd was one of the second most played deck on the Saturday,
Mm,
with 8 pilots. So tied for the most played deck with 8 pilots on the Saturday to being 2 pilots on the Sunday.
yeah,
So which I would expect if obviously people expected a lot of Colgate and a lot of Glitters, like it's got one of those good matchups, but obviously expecting Colgate, I'd just avoid that like the plague if you are playing that deck. But still sweet stuff as well, which is also good to see. Still got Ponza, still got Turbo Fog, still got Poison Storm, Elves, Dredge. Like there's still a lot of room. Walls, Bogles, Black White Blade. All of these decks are still there, still partaking.
yeah.
So
It just makes breaking into the top eights harder when 50% of the slots are basically auto taken up.
yeah.
Obviously we are seeing stuff still come through, like we're seeing the Bogles and the Toxin deck
Mm.
on the Saturday, and then obviously the Cycle Storm and the Fams on the Sunday. Like people that are still getting these decks into top eights, but there's just a lot less of them when 50% of the top eight is Blue White Glitters or Colgates or both.
Yes. For sure. Would you like to move on to some shoutouts?
Yeah, yeah, go for it.
So shout out firstly to Alvatar for that sweet toxin deck and obviously developing that. That
Yeah,
is pretty good going. Shout out to Mogged obviously for the top 8 on the Saturday, and Burner Stores. Sorry if I did butcher the name. I'm not gonna lie to you. For the top 2, I think split the finals on the Saturday. We obviously have to shout out GN because he top forward with FAMS. Congrats. Keep fighting the good fight, I guess. And finally, shout out to Against for playing on the Saturday. Was playing, I think, his Kuldotha Wellspringy deck. Definitely on Kuldotha. Might not have been on his Wellspring pile. But for constantly, obviously, still representing the PFP and still playing in challenges.
yeah,
Nice to see. Always good to see.
yeah. It is cool. We haven't seen Hyson in a challenge in a while. That's something I've sort of missed.
Mm.
But yeah, it's always nice to see members of the PFP like playing in the community. It's really good. I guess I'll just add on to that. I think Tyrube as well deserves a shout out for
Yeah.
the run they're on with
Cycle Storm, yeah.
Cycle Storm. It's yeah, really impressive.
Keep playing cool decks,
Mm.
I guess. Yeah, shout out. Nicely done. Would you like to move on to hot takes from last week?
Yes. So my first one from last week was that Blue White Glitters will be hated out pretty hard next week. People obviously aren't trying hard enough because it absolutely dominated both challenges. So hopefully that comes to pass next week. Hopefully we're just a week off.
Hopefully. So mine was pretty on the nose. I can get them right sometimes. Very rare, but it does happen. Blue White Glitters will be the most represent aggro deck next week in the top 16. It was just the most represent aggro deck in general. Also, there was 4 on Saturday in the top 16, I think, and 5 on the Sunday. And also the most represented deck on both days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My second one was that Kuldotha would make a strong return to the top 8. Yeah, not even close. Plus, no one's playing it.
Yeah. It's all right. We'll get there. We'll get there. Kuldotha will be back. We'll be wishing Kuldotha back. I never thought we'd see that day. My final one was that more Dredge next week due to the God of Pauper and / other event success. This just didn't happen.
No.
There was 0 people played Dredge on the Saturday and 1 person played it on the Sunday, and I think came like 40th or something silly.
Yeah, it was low down. Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't the weekend for Dredge. Next week.
Next week. Next week. We'll get there. We'll get there. People will forget the relics, and then it'll do well once, and then it'll be gone again for 6 weeks. That's usually the cycle. Would you like to move into hot takes for next week?
Yes, my first one is that Blue White Glitters and Corgate will make up 6 to 8 decks of the next week's top 8. So a very cheery one.
Woo! Yeah, I can definitely see that.
We're sort of getting there already, so
yeah, you are. I think
right. it was what 5 on the Sunday, and 4 on the Saturday.
Nearly there. My next one is that Black White Blade. So I want to tie myself in knots with this deck because I know people end up loving and hating it. So the best way I'm going to describe it is Black White Blade will have a high conversion rate in the top 16. Because I don't think many people will actually play it, but I do think it's going to be well positioned that it's going to do well.
So if one person plays it in top 16, do you get the win?
Exactly. Think smart, not hard.
And yeah, my last one is that Bogles will continue to sneak into top 10s. Obviously, a lot of these top 8s and top 10s are being taken up by Corgates and Blue White Glitters. But yeah, I think that there are obviously decks that are still sneaking into the gaps, and I think Bogles is one of them. And I expect or hope it will be there next week as well.
My next one is that Blue Black Terror will basically have the best way to describe this is have a good week next week. I don't know why. I'm just got a feeling that it'll just have a good week next week. I guess there's people been honing in on the blue red version, especially on the Saturday, with obviously being 8 pilots and stuff like that. But Blue Black will definitely pips that post if it's going to be Glitters and Corgate and being the deck. So I think that the people are going to pick up on that and obviously realise that Blue Black's probably the place to go. Maybe even Blue Black Control. Maybe.
I think Blue Black Terror is probably the best positioned at the moment of the Terror deck, so it does make sense that it would have a good week. It just depends if it's having a better week than Corgate and Blue White Glitters.
Yeah, that is always the downside. Your 5/5's being blocked by a 1/1 Squadron Hawk for days. Anything else to add?
No, that's it from me.
Thank you all for listening. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please do not forget to share it with your friends, your family, your local pauper community, and your librarian. It will be greatly appreciated just to give us all that exposure and love that we totally deserve for this hard work. Not being modest, honest. That is all from us at Cast and Comments. Until next time, and do not forget to stay hydrated. Peace!
Bye.